My husband looked at me across our anniversary dinner table and said, "At 70, you're lucky I still stay." I set down my wine glass slowly, looked him straight in the eye, and replied, "At 72, you're lucky I let you." He laughed. He actually laughed, thinking I was joking. What he didn't know was that I'd been documenting his affair for 6 months. Every hotel receipt, every suspicious phone call, every lie. And what he'd completely forgotten about, or perhaps never really understood, was the ironclad prenup his attorney had insisted we sign 35 years ago to protect his inheritance. That prenup was about to save me everything. Hello, my name is Vivian Harper, and this is the story of how I turned my husband's arrogance into my greatest victory. Before I begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or state in the comments below. It helps me know I'm not alone in this, and maybe my story will help someone out there who needs to hear it. Now let me take you back to where this really began. 6 months before that anniversary dinner, I was living what most people would call a comfortable life in Portland, Maine. Richard and I had been married for 35 years. We'd raised 2 children who were now adults with families of their own. Richard had retired from his position as a senior partner at a commercial real estate firm. I'd spent my career as a high school English teacher before retiring at 65. Our life looked perfect from the outside. We had a beautiful colonial home overlooking Casco Bay, a healthy investment portfolio, and the kind of marriage that people at the country club called inspirational. But here's what I've learned in my 70 years on this earth. The prettier the picture, the more rot there might be behind the frame. It started with small things. A new cologne I'd never smelled before. Business trips that seemed to multiply despite retirement. A sudden interest in the gym at an age when most men are happy with a daily walk. Richard started dressing differently. Younger, somehow. He bought slim-fit shirts and had his gray hair styled instead of just cut. "I'm just taking better care of myself," he'd say when I'd comment. At first I believed him. I even felt a little guilty for not making the same efforts. Maybe I'd let myself go. Maybe at 70 I wasn't enough anymore. Then came February 14th, Valentine's Day. I found the credit card statement he'd forgotten to hide. Dinner at Evangeline's, Portland's most expensive restaurant, on February 12th. The bill was for $247. We'd spent Valentine's Day itself at home with takeout Chinese food because Richard said he was too tired to go out. That receipt was my wake-up call. That receipt changed everything. I sat in my reading chair that afternoon, holding that statement in my hands, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to cry or scream or beg. I was going to do something much smarter. I was going to document everything. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 35 years of marriage. I went through Richard's home office while he was at his gym session. My hands were shaking as I opened his desk drawers. This felt wrong, like I was becoming someone I wasn't. But then I thought about that Valentine's dinner receipt, and my hands steadied. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of old golf magazines, I found a second cell phone. A second phone. Let that sink in. My husband had a phone I didn't know about. I didn't touch it. I didn't turn it on. I simply photographed it exactly where it lay, checked the time, and closed the drawer carefully. If there was one thing my 35 years of teaching high school students had taught me, it was this: evidence means nothing if you contaminate it. I went back to the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea with trembling hands, and opened my laptop. I created a new email account, one Richard would never find. Then I created a folder on a cloud drive and titled it simply February 2024. That folder would eventually hold the truth of my marriage. Over the next week, I became someone I never imagined I'd be. I checked credit card statements the moment they arrived online. I noted every time Richard left the house and when he returned. I started taking photos of his car's odometer to track mileage against his claimed destinations. But I was careful. So careful. Richard never suspected a thing. "You seem happy lately," he commented one evening. "Just enjoying retirement," I replied, smiling at him over my reading glasses. If only he knew that I was happy because I was finally taking control of a situation that had made me feel powerless. 2 weeks after finding that phone, I followed him. I'm not proud of it, but I did it. He said he was meeting his former colleague, David, for lunch at a sports bar in South Portland. I waited 15 minutes, then drove to that same area. His car wasn't at any sports bar. It was parked at a luxury apartment complex called Harbor Heights. I sat in my car 3 blocks away, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be having a heart attack. I watched for 2 hours. When Richard finally emerged, he wasn't alone. She looked about 45, pretty in that carefully maintained way, with highlighted blonde hair and expensive workout clothes. He walked her to a silver Lexus, and before she got in, he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, a real kiss. The kind of kiss we hadn't shared in years. I took 17 photos with my phone's camera. Every single one was clear, time-stamped, and GPS tagged. Then I drove home, beat him there by 20 minutes, and was stirring pasta sauce when he walked in. "How was lunch with David?" I asked pleasantly. "Great," he said without hesitation. "We're getting too old for those loaded nachos, though. My stomach's not what it used to be." He lied so smoothly, so easily, like he'd had years of practice. Maybe he had. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Richard, listening to him snore, and I felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger. How long had this been going on? Was she the first, the second, the 10th? Who was this man I'd spent 35 years with? At 3 in the morning, I got up and went to my home office, the small converted sunroom where I used to grade papers and now did my book club reading. I closed the door and opened my laptop. Her license plate had been visible in one of my photos. It took me less than 20 minutes of internet searching to find her. Her name was Ashley Kensington. She was 43 years old, divorced, and worked as a lifestyle consultant, whatever that meant. Her Instagram was public, and it was full of photos from expensive restaurants, beach vacations, and yoga poses. And there, if you scrolled back 4 months, was a photo taken at Portland Head Light. In the background, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, was a man in a blue jacket. Richard owned that exact jacket. I saved that photo, too. Over the next 3 months, I became a woman on a mission. I learned things about surveillance and documentation that I never thought I'd need to know. I discovered that Richard had been meeting Ashley every Tuesday and Thursday, the days he claimed he was at the gym or running errands. I found hotel receipts from Portland, Portsmouth, and even Boston. Weekend trips he'd claimed were fishing expeditions with the guys. I called his friend Tom casually one day. "Richard's been talking about planning another fishing trip," I mentioned. "He said you all had such a good time in March." There was a pause. "In March? Vivian, we haven't been fishing since last September." "Oh, silly me," I said lightly. "I must have my months mixed up." But I didn't have anything mixed up. I added Tom's statement to my documentation file. I photographed everything. Restaurant receipts showing 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, charges from Victoria's Secret. I hadn't received any gifts from there in years. A charge from a jewelry store. I never got that jewelry either. The money he was spending on her was our money. Money I'd contributed to during my 35 years of teaching. Money from the house we'd bought together, improved together, lived in together. Every discovery made me angrier, but I didn't let it show. I became an actress in my own life. I smiled over breakfast. I asked about his day. I kissed him goodbye when he left for his errands. And every time he lied to me, I documented it. By May, I had a file that would make any attorney weep with joy, but I still hadn't confronted him. I was waiting for something, though I wasn't sure what. Then, in late May, I found something that changed everything. I was looking through old files in our safe, the one in our bedroom closet, searching for my mother's jewelry to give to our daughter. That's when I found the prenuptial agreement. I'd honestly forgotten it existed. I sat on our bedroom floor holding that prenup and started reading it for the first time in 35 years. Richard had been the one to insist on it. Back then, in 1989, I'd been hurt by the request. I was 25, he was 27, and we were in love. But his father had just passed away, leaving Richard a substantial inheritance, and the family attorney strongly advised protecting those assets. "It's just a formality," Richard had assured me then. "It doesn't mean anything. I love you." So I'd signed it, barely reading it, because I was young and trusted him completely. Now, at 70 years old, sitting on our bedroom floor, I read every single word, and I started to smile. The prenup protected Richard's inheritance. That much was true. But it had been written by a very thorough attorney who wanted to ensure my father-in-law's money stayed in the family. What it actually stated was that any assets Richard brought into the marriage, specifically the inheritance and the family property in Cape Elizabeth, remained his separate property only if the marriage ended in divorce due to mutual agreement or irreconcilable differences. However, and this was the beautiful part, if the marriage ended due to adultery, the prenup became void, completely void. Not only that, but there was a morality clause. If Richard was found to be engaging in extramarital affairs or conduct unbefitting the family reputation, he would forfeit his right to any assets accumulated during the marriage. Every single asset we'd built together would become mine. The house we'd bought together? Mine. The investment portfolio we'd grown over 3 decades? Mine. His pension and retirement accounts that had been built during our marriage? Mine to claim a significant portion. This prenup wasn't protecting him. With his affair, it was protecting me. I photographed every page of that prenup. Then I put it back exactly where I'd found it. That night at dinner, Richard was in a particularly good mood. "Ashley's been so helpful with some investment advice," he said, and then caught himself. His face went pale. "I meant David's friend, Ashley, the financial consultant I mentioned. Remember?" He'd never mentioned any Ashley to me. He was getting sloppy. "Oh, right," I said, taking a sip of wine. "That's nice, dear." I could see the relief flood his face. He thought he'd gotten away with it, but I'd just gotten the confirmation I needed. He'd said her name, he'd slipped, and I'd recorded every word on my phone, which was sitting innocently on the counter recording our family memories as I often did. That night, I lay in bed making calculations. I was 70 years old. Richard was 72. We could both potentially live another 15 or 20 years. Did I want to spend those years with a man who lied to me, who was spending our money on another woman, who clearly had so little respect for me that he couldn't even keep his affair partner's name straight? Or did I want to spend those years free, independent, finally living life on my own terms? The answer was so obvious it almost made me laugh. I was going to be free, and that prenup was going to make it possible. In June, I did something I'd been avoiding. I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Webb, and he came highly recommended by my attorney. Yes, I'd already quietly consulted with a divorce lawyer named Patricia Chen, who'd nearly jumped out of her chair when I showed her that prenup. "Mrs. Harper," she'd said, "this is one of the most favorable prenuptial agreements I've ever seen, for you. If we can prove adultery, you're going to walk away with everything you're entitled to and more." Marcus was a former police detective, now in his early 60s, professional and discreet. We met at a coffee shop in Freeport, far enough from Portland that we wouldn't run into anyone I knew. "I need you to understand something," I told him. "I already know about the affair. I already have evidence. What I need is documentation that will hold up in court absolutely airtight. No questions, no doubts, nothing his lawyers can challenge." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Smart. Most people come to me desperate and emotional. You're coming prepared." "I'm a 70-year-old woman who spent 35 years teaching teenagers," I said. "I know how to do my homework." Over the next 6 weeks, Marcus did what I couldn't do safely. He followed Richard and Ashley. He documented their meetings, their hotel visits, their intimate dinners. He got photographs with professional equipment, clear, dated, GPS tagged, and legally obtained. The The report he gave me in late July was 47 pages long. Richard and Ashley had been seeing each other for 14 months. They met twice a week, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They'd taken 3 weekend trips together, including one to a resort in Vermont where Richard had registered them as Mr. and Mrs. Richards. He hadn't even bothered to use a fake name, just his own last name. Ashley thought Richard was divorced. Marcus had managed to overhear one of their conversations at a restaurant. She had no idea he was still married and living with me. That detail broke my heart more than anything else. Richard had erased me from his life so completely that his mistress didn't even know I existed. But it also meant Ashley wasn't the enemy here. She was being lied to as much as I was. I paid Marcus his fee, $5,000 that I withdrew from my own savings account, money I'd earned from years of summer teaching and tutoring. Then I took that 47-page report and added it to my growing file. My documentation now included 6 months of credit card statements showing suspicious charges, photographs of Richard and Ashley together, the second phone, which I'd photographed but never touched, professional surveillance reports, hotel receipts, mileage logs, recorded conversations where Richard had lied about his whereabouts, the prenuptial agreement, financial records showing our complete marital assets. Patricia Chen reviewed everything in early August. "Vivian," she said, looking up at me with something like awe. "This is the most thoroughly documented case of adultery I've seen in my 23 years of practice. He can't fight this. He can't deny this. And with that prenup, he won't have a leg to stand on." "Good," I said simply, "because I'm ready to move forward." "When do you want to serve him?" I thought about that carefully. "Our anniversary is September 15th, I said. "I want to wait until then." Patricia looked at me with concern. "Vivian, are you sure? That's still 5 weeks away. Why put yourself through that?" I smiled. "Because I want him to take me to that anniversary dinner. I want him to sit across from me and pretend to celebrate 35 years of marriage. I want him to lie to my face one more time. And then I want to show him exactly what those lies cost him." She nodded slowly. "I understand. We'll prepare everything to be filed the day after." Those 5 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went through the motions of being a wife while knowing it was all about to end. I planned our anniversary dinner reservation. I bought a new dress, a beautiful navy blue one that made me feel powerful. I even bought Richard a card. Inside I wrote, 35 years together, here's to the truth finally coming out. Vivian. He'd understand what it meant soon enough. Richard was on his best behavior in those weeks. He cut back on his errands. He was home more often. He even suggested we take a weekend trip to Bar Harbor. "Like old times," he said. I agreed, and we went. We walked along the shore. We ate lobster at our favorite restaurant. We held hands, and the entire time I was thinking, you have no idea what's coming. He thought he'd won. He thought he had me fooled, and her on the side, and his comfortable life all sewn up perfectly. But here's what Richard never understood about me. I'm patient. I spent 35 years teaching 16-year-olds English literature. I've read every word Shakespeare wrote, every Greek tragedy, every story about hubris and pride and the fall that comes after. Richard's fall was coming. He just didn't know it yet. If you're watching this and you've ever been betrayed, you know what I'm talking about. If you've ever felt like the world sees you as too old, too tired, too irrelevant to fight back, please hit that subscribe button, because this story is for you, and I want you to see how it ends. September 15th arrived on a beautiful Tuesday evening. The weather was perfect. One of those late summer nights in Maine where the air is just cool enough to need. A light jacket and the sunset over the water is breathtaking. Richard picked the restaurant, Evangeline's, the same place he'd taken Ashley on Valentine's Day. I said nothing. I just smiled and said it sounded lovely. I wore my new navy dress and my mother's pearl necklace. I did my makeup carefully, my silver hair styled elegantly. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a 70-year-old woman who looked strong, dignified, and ready. Richard wore a suit I'd never seen before. "New?" I asked. "Got it last month," he said. "Thought I'd look nice for our special day." I wondered if he'd worn it for Ashley first. We drove to the restaurant in his car, making small talk about our daughter's upcoming visit and the changing leaves. Richard seemed relaxed, even happy. He had no idea that this was our last dinner together as a married couple. No idea that I'd spent 6 months preparing for this moment. No idea that the prenup he'd forgotten about had sealed his fate. The restaurant was elegant, with white tablecloths and candles and a view of the Portland waterfront. Our table was by the window. "The best seat in the house," the hostess said. Richard ordered wine, an expensive bottle that I knew would cost about as much as that Valentine's dinner had cost him. He raised his glass for a toast. "To 35 years, he said, "to my beautiful wife." I clinked my glass against his and took a sip. The wine was excellent. I was glad I'd get to taste it before what was about to happen. We ordered dinner. Richard talked about maybe taking a cruise this winter, maybe to the Caribbean. "We should enjoy ourselves," he said. "We've earned it." "We certainly have," I agreed. Our meals arrived. The food was exquisite. Richard was in such a good mood telling stories about his early days at the real estate firm, reminiscing about when our kids were little, painting this picture of our wonderful life together. I let him talk. I ate my sea bass and roasted vegetables. I drank my wine. I watched him perform. Dessert came, a chocolate torte to share, with "Happy Anniversary" written in raspberry sauce on the plate. That's when Richard's demeanor shifted slightly. He reached across the table and took my hand. "Vivian," he said, his voice taking on a serious tone, "I want to talk to you about something." My heart started to pound, but I kept my face neutral. "Of course." "We're getting older," he continued. "I'm 72 now, you're 70, and I've been thinking about our future, our life together." I waited. "I think maybe we should consider simplifying things, maybe downsizing. The house is a lot to maintain. Maybe we should look at a condo, something more manageable." I knew what he was doing. He wanted to sell our house. The house I decorated, maintained, and loved for 3 decades. The house where we'd raised our children. He wanted to liquidate our biggest asset and split it with me, probably giving himself the freedom to move on with Ashley. "And," he continued, squeezing my hand, "I've been thinking we might want to consider our finances, maybe split some of our accounts, give each of us more independence. At our age, we should each have our own autonomy." Translation: he wanted to protect his money before leaving me. "I mean," he said, with a smile that I now recognized as condescending, "at 70, you're lucky I still stay. A lot of men my age would have left for a younger woman by now." There it was, the line that would become infamous in this story. I set down my fork very carefully. I looked him directly in the eyes, those blue eyes I'd once loved so much, and I said quietly and clearly, "At 72, Richard, you're lucky I let you." He laughed. He actually threw back his head and laughed like I'd made a joke. "That's my Vivian," he said, always with a comeback. "I'm not joking," I said. His smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" I opened my purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was one photograph, Richard and Ashley kissing in the parking lot of Harbor Heights. Time-stamped, date-stamped, GPS stamped. I slid the photograph across the table. Richard's face went white, actually white, like all the blood had drained from his body in an instant. He picked up the photo with shaking hands. "Vivian, this isn't..." "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't insult me by lying. Not anymore." He looked around the restaurant frantically as if checking who might be watching. His composure was completely gone. This wasn't the confident man who'd been talking about simplifying our life 5 minutes ago. This was someone who'd just realized he'd been caught. "How long have you known?" he whispered. 6 months, I said calmly. "I've known for 6 months, Richard. I've documented everything, Every hotel receipt, every lie about where you were, every time you came home smelling like her perfume, every dollar you spent on her with our money. Vivian, please let me explain. Explain what? That you've been seeing Ashley Kensington for 14 months? That you took her to Vermont and registered as Mr. and Mrs. Richards? That you've been meeting her every Tuesday and Thursday while telling me you were at the gym? I kept my voice low, but every word was precise. Should I mention that she thinks you're divorced? That you erased me so completely from your life that your mistress doesn't even know I exist? His mouth opened and closed. No words came out. And tonight, I continued, you had the audacity, the sheer arrogance, to sit across from me on our anniversary and suggest we simplify our finances. You thought you'd get ahead of this, didn't you? You thought you'd protect your money before leaving me for her. It's not like that. Then you told me I was lucky you stayed. I leaned forward slightly. At 70, I'm lucky. Lucky to have a husband who's been lying to me for over a year. Lucky to have a man who respects me so little, he'd spend our anniversary dinner planning his exit strategy. People at nearby tables were starting to glance over. Richard noticed. Can we please not do this here? He hissed. Why not here? I asked. This is where you brought her for Valentine's Day. Did you sit at this same table? Did you order the same wine? His face told me I was right. I want a divorce, I said clearly, and thanks to that prenuptial agreement your father's attorney made us sign, the one you've apparently forgotten all about, you're not going to fight me on the terms. What are you talking about? His voice was panicked now. The prenup protects my inheritance. Your inheritance, yes, I agreed. But did you ever actually read the adultery clause? Did you understand what happens to that prenup if you're unfaithful? I watched the realization slowly dawn on his face. He hadn't read it. Or he'd read it 35 years ago and forgotten. Or he'd never thought he'd be stupid enough to get caught. No, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Vivian, no, we can work this out. I'll end it with her. I'll do anything, please. Now he wanted to negotiate. Now, when he realized what he stood to lose. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. You'll be served with divorce papers tomorrow morning, I said, standing there in my navy dress, looking down at the man who'd thought I'd just accept my place. My attorney has everything. Every piece of evidence, every lie you've told, every dollar you've spent. And that prenup you forgot about? It voids your protection. The house is mine, Richard. The investment accounts we built together. Mine to claim the majority. Your pension accumulated during our marriage. Mine to claim my portion. You can't do this, he said, but his voice had no strength in it. I already have, I replied. I spent 6 months doing this. While you were busy thinking I was too old, too comfortable, too stupid to notice what you were doing, I was building an airtight case against you. I picked up my purse. Vivian, wait! He reached for my arm. I stepped back. Don't touch me. You lost that right when you touched her. What about our children? Our grandchildren? You're going to destroy our family over this? That made me laugh, actually laugh. I'm destroying our family. Richard, you destroyed it 14 months ago when you started an affair. You destroyed it every time you lied to me. You destroyed it tonight when you sat across from me and suggested I was lucky you hadn't already left. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant every word. You think I'm too old to be desirable, too old to deserve respect, too old to fight back. I leaned down slightly, making sure he heard every word. But here's what you forgot. I'm not too old to be smart. I'm not too old to know my worth. And I'm definitely not too old to walk away from someone who doesn't value me. I straightened up. Several people in the restaurant were openly watching now. I didn't care. You can pay for dinner, I said. Consider it one last expensive meal on our joint account. After tomorrow, you'll be paying for everything on your own. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high. I didn't look back. I'd called a car service earlier. I'd planned this all out carefully. The driver was waiting outside. He opened the door for me, and I got in. As we drove away, I could see Richard through the restaurant window, still sitting at our table, his head in his hands. I felt no satisfaction in his pain, no joy in his despair. I just felt free. The papers were served the next morning at 9. Richard called me 47 times that day. I didn't answer once. My attorney handled everything. He tried to fight it for about 3 weeks. His lawyer took one look at the evidence. My 6 months of documentation, the private investigator's report, the ironclad prenup with its adultery clause, and advised him to settle. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. In the end, I kept our house on Casco Bay. I received 60% of our investment portfolio. I got my portion of his pension, and most importantly, I got my freedom. Richard moved into a small condo in South Portland. Ashley broke up with him when she found out he'd been married. She felt betrayed, rightfully so. The divorce was final in January. On a cold Tuesday morning, I signed the last papers in Patricia Chen's office and walked out a single woman for the first time in 35 years. I was 70 years old. I was divorced. I was alone. And I was completely, entirely, absolutely fine. Better than fine. I was free. My daughter came to visit that weekend. She'd been supportive throughout the whole process, though I know it was hard for her to reconcile the father she'd known with the man who'd had an affair. "Mom," she said as we sat in my living room in my house, "I'm proud of you. A lot of women your age would have just stayed, accepted it." "A lot of women my age were taught that's what you do," I replied. "But I spent 35 years teaching young women to know their worth, to stand up for themselves, to never accept less than they deserve. It would be pretty hypocritical if I didn't follow my own advice." She hugged me tight. "You're my hero," she whispered. In the months since the divorce, I've rebuilt my life. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. I joined a book club, a real one, not the couples club Richard and I used to attend. I started taking watercolor classes. I traveled to Boston to visit my son and his family without having to check if Richard wanted to come along. I wake up every morning in my beautiful house overlooking the bay, and I make my coffee exactly how I like it. And I sit on my porch and watch the sunrise, and I think, this is what 70 looks like. This is what freedom looks like. Richard tried to reach out a few times in those first months. I never responded. We had nothing left to say to each other. I heard through mutual friends that he's struggling financially, living much more modestly than he expected. I heard he tried to reconcile with Ashley, but she wanted nothing to do with him. I don't take pleasure in his struggles, but I don't feel sorry for him either. He made his choices. He's living with the consequences. And me? I'm living my life, my real life. The one I choose every single day. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where someone makes you feel like you're too old, too comfortable, or too anything to deserve better, please hear me when I say this. You are never too old to know your worth. You are never too old to demand respect. You are never too old to start over. I was 70 years old when I documented my husband's affair. 70 when I discovered a prenup I'd forgotten about. 70 when I rebuilt my entire life. And if I can do it, so can you. My name is Vivian Harper, and this is my story. Thank you for watching, and remember, it's never too late to reclaim your life.